Good morning, this is Professor Buchman, and in each module there will be a grammar unit. I will give a mini lecture on one grammatical point, and then there'll be in the module written follow-up exercises. I'll try to use as few terms as possible, but there are some points that I feel that we must cover in this class. Of course, when I read your essays, I will be giving suggestions to you individually. We're going to start today, and it's going to cover the next few modules, with the topic of run-on sentences. Now, I picked run-on sentences because they are the most common grammatical error that college students make. In fact, they're very common. In fact, I've already seen some run-ons in your responses to the icebreaker that you've already put up in the class. Now, what are run-on sentences? I bet you think that run-on sentences are sentences that run on and on and on and on. They're not. They're not. It's a terrible name for this grammatical problem. And if I were the grammar czar, I would change the name. But I'm not the grammar czar, so we have to stick with run-on sentences, and we are definitely going to figure out what they are and how to fix them. That's what we're going to be doing in the next few modules. Okay, what is a run-on sentence? It has nothing to do with length. Nothing. A run-on sentence is a sentence that has two complete sentences that are incorrectly joined. So you've got one sentence and you've got another sentence, and right there, they're not joined right. That's the problem. Let's look at an example of a run-on sentence and talk about how to fix it. Now, I just want to give you an overview. We're going to cover in this course 4 ways to fix run-ons. And today, we're going to cover in this module the first 2. Okay, let's look at an example of a run-on. Here's one. It's going to sound okay. He danced, he sang. That sounds fine. But let's look how it's punctuated. He danced. That's a complete sentence. He is the subject, danced is the verb. He danced. It's fine. It's a complete sentence. He sang. He sang. That's a complete sentence. He's the subject. Sang is the verb. But it is joined by a comma. That is the problem. You cannot join 2 complete sentences with just a comma. That is the problem that students make. The corrections, instead of where the comma was, let's put a period. He danced, period. He sang. Fine, grammatically correct. Of course, no one ever makes this mistake. After the period, you have to change it to a capital letter. You never make that mistake. Okay, so that's using a period to correct the run-on. Let's look at one more example. She bought a used laptop. It worked fine, but not as fast as a new one. Sounds okay. We don't hear run-ons, but let's look at how they're written and see what the punctuation problem here. She bought a used laptop. That's a complete sentence. She's the subject, bought's the verb. This tells us what she bought. She bought a used laptop. Complete sentence. It worked fine, but not as fast as a new one. A complete sentence. It's the subject, worked is the verb. But again, so this is a complete sentence. This is a complete sentence. Look what's joining them. Just a comma. You cannot join 2 complete sentences with just a comma. If you do, you got to run on. Okay, let's use our method of using a period to fix this problem. Okay, over here, she bought a used laptop. Period. It worked fine, but not as fast as a new one. Okay, so this simplest way usually to fix your run-ons is simply use a period where you have the comma. Now let's look at our second way to fix run-ons. The second way to fix a run-on is to use a semicolon instead of where that nasty comma is that's incorrectly joining the 2 sentences. Okay, what's a semicolon? It looks like this. Okay, that's a semicolon. Now, when would you use a semicolon instead of a period? You'd use a semicolon when you want the two sentences to be sort of closer together, a period is an abrupt stop, it's a real break. A semicolon keeps them a little bit closer together. So let's look at the first example that we used before. Okay, remember the short run-on? He danced, he sang. It is a run-on because this is a complete sentence and this is a complete sentence, and it is incorrectly joined at this point because there's just a comma. Let's fix it with a semicolon. So we can say he danced, he sang. And notice this time, after a semicolon, you do not capitalize the first letter of the next sentence. That emphasizes the idea that the semicolon keeps the sentences closer together, that you don't want to make that abrupt stop yet. Okay, let's look at another example. I'll never forget the day I walked into her office. That was the day that changed my life. Okay, again, it sounds good. It's not like you're writing weird sentences. It's just that you're punctuating them incorrectly and thus creating a run-on. Okay, let's see, where's the run-on here? I'll never forget the day I walked into her office. That's a complete sentence. That was the day that changed my life. That's a complete sentence. So you cannot, remember, you cannot take two complete sentences and join them just with that comma. Okay, let's use a semicolon there. I'll never forget the day I walked into her office. That was the day that changed my life. So it keeps it together. And again, we don't capitalize this. Okay, let's do one more example. Okay, here's another run-on. Years have passed since I visited my own old school. Now the windows are covered with boards. Okay, years have passed since I visited my old school. That is a perfectly good sentence. Now the windows are covered with boards. That's a perfectly good sentence. The problem is the joining. Joining with just a comma is a no-no, and that creates the run-on. We could have used a period, but let's try a semicolon. Years have passed since I visited my old school. Now the windows are covered with boards. Perfectly good sentence. The run-on is fixed, and again, we keep this a small letter. Okay, I have one word of warning about semicolons. After I teach this unit on semicolons, I find that students, well, the good part is that students say, oh, that's interesting, I've never used semicolons before, and then they start using them all over the place. So at first that's fine, because I'm pleased because I see you're paying attention, but don't use them so liberally. Use them sparely. My rule of thumb is one per page. If you're using more than one on a page, it doesn't seem right. Just remember when you use it that there has to be a complete sentence on both sides of the semicolon. Let's review. We have covered run-ons, the definition of a run-on. A run-on sentence is a sentence that has two complete sentences that are incorrectly joined. We have talked about two ways to fix the run-on. One is using a period instead of that comma, and two is to using a semicolon. Okay, go now to the module, and you will see that there is a written exercise to practice this. Thank you.